understood fear. Because fear in their lives was so real, they were considered unclean. They were considered cut off from their families, from the community. In fact, they weren't even allowed to come into the temple or near the temple. They had to live outside the city gates. All 10 of them. People were afraid of them. And when they came near to the town, they had to ring a bell. They rang that bell, unclean, unclean. And people would hide from them. People would keep their distance. Even the religious leaders, those who were supposed to be the mediators between God and humanity, held them at a distance, and also God's love at a distance. Yet in the story we hear, all 10 were healed. All healed from the outward symptoms of leprosy. But the Samaritan leper still remains an outcast. He still remains a foreigner, even to the other 9 who were healed. Because he was a Samaritan. He goes back in ancient history, he was considered unclean by the Jews. So the Samaritan doesn't go back to the Jewish priest because they're not going to accept him. Even if he's cured of leprosy, they're still not going to accept him. Because not only did they consider the leper unclean, they had that long hatred. Remember the story of the Samaritan woman at the well? Remember the story of the Good Samaritan? Samaritan in today's story, although healed, still had no community, still could not go to the temple. The walls and the boundaries were ancient. The fences were high. The scars of hate, suspicion, distrust ran deep. And so this Samaritan was still not welcome, still not invited to sit at the table. So the healed leper only had one place to go, one place to return, and that was Jesus. Because somehow he could see in the eyes of Jesus, he could hear in the words of Jesus, and understood that in Jesus' way of living and Jesus' way of welcoming, Jesus' way of inviting people, that there were so many in this world that lived foreign to God's love and mercy. Don't we have that in our world today? There are so many that don't know God's love or God's mercy and God's compassion. Because we as religious leaders have kind of held them apart. We as good religious people sometimes have held them at bay. But this Samaritan, this healed leper, puts his faith in Jesus and the unconditional love of God, which is total acceptance. Have you ever wondered if there's others, maybe even sitting here, sitting next to you? Other persons sitting next to you or in your neighborhood or co-workers that feel like foreigners, that aren't accepted, that aren't welcomed, that somehow are always, God's love is always held and they're pushed away from that. And while they look healed on the outside, you know, we all look pretty healed on the outside. Some of us older, but some of us are healed. But we're still hurting on the inside. There's a lot of people that hurt on the inside. I think of how long does it take to get over some of the things that happen to us, even as children. when we're bullied by others. Or growing up in a family where someone deserts us, a mother or father deserts the family. Where there's family addictions, where there's memories of parents in domestic violence and abuse and sexual abuse and poverty, growing up on the wrong side of the tracks, the wrong side of the border, sexual orientation, or different skin color. Somehow all these people out there, all these foreign people. And Jesus has a different look. He looks differently. For Jesus, there were no hoops to jump through, no requirements for perfection, just unchained grace, as St. Paul said in that second reading. Unchained grace, healing and love. And that's what we are to be as a church. We should be seeking the lost. We should be seeking those that are foreign. We should be seeking those who are held back because of their nationality, of their race. I was reading that St. Francis of Assisi one day was praying very fervently to God. And he received an answer. And he said, God said to Francis, "Oh, Francis, if you want to know my will, you must hate and despise all that which up till now your body has loved and desired to possess. Once you begin to do this, all that formerly seemed sweet and pleasant to you will become bitter and unbearable. And instead, the things that formerly made you shudder will bring you great sweetness and content." Francis was divinely comforted and greatly encouraged by these words. Then one day, as he was riding near Assisi, he met a leper. He had always felt an overpowering horror of these sufferers. But making a great effort, he conquered his aversion, dismounted, and in giving the leper a coin, kissed his hand. The leper then gave him a kiss of peace, after which Francis remounted his horse and rode on his way. Some days later, he took a large sum of money to the leper hospital, and gathering all the inmates together, he gave them alms, kissing each of their hands. Formerly, he could neither touch nor even look at lepers, but when he had left them that day, what had been so repugnant to him had really and truly been turned into something pleasant. Indeed, his previous aversion to lepers had been so strong that beside being incapable of looking at them, he would not even approach the place where they lived. And if by chance he happened to pass anywhere near their dwellings or to see one of the lepers, even though he was moved to give them an alms or some intermediate help, he would nevertheless turn his face away and hold his nose. But strengthened by God's grace, he was enabled to obey the command and to love what he had hated and to abhor what he had until then wrongly loved. The Lord asks us to change our ways each and every day. And the model of our Lord Jesus, looking at each of us, says, reach out in compassion and love to those who need it the most.